Hello lovelies, and welcome back to Squeaky's Cauldron, or welcome if this is your first time here. I'm your host, Sarah Evergreen. Thank you for coming to my weird little corner of the internet where we talk about witchy shits and all things wild and wonderful. So today we're going to be talking about the differences between Mary Magdalene and the Virgin Mary. Now, I don't know about you, but for a long time the two were kind of conflated in my head. There's a lot of Marys in the Bible, for one thing. But these two women were extremely close to Jesus Christ. And I want to go through a little bit about why they're different, how their energies are different, their stories are very different, obviously, and kind of zeroing in on Mary Magdalene because we're going to be talking about her all week this week. Before we get into that, I just want to say thank you so much. All of my initial 3 beta coaching spots have been filled. I'm really excited to work with everyone who signed up. Thank you so much. And I have decided, because those did fill up pretty quickly, that I'm going to open 3 more spots. Now, these are not going to be free. These are going to be $100 each, but you'll get the same thing. 3 45-minute phone calls throughout the month of September, or maybe even into October if timing works out that way, specifically focused on helping you get unstuck so that you can move on to the next big thing in your life. If you are interested, just go to www.squeakiescauldron.com/coaching. The link, of course, will be in the description, and I hope to hear from you soon. Okay, now on to the two Marys. The Mother Mary, Virgin Mary, and Mary Magdalene were the 2 women who were the closest to Jesus throughout his life. It's argued, quite convincingly, that Mary Magdalene was actually the closest person to him. Period, full stop. Well, let's do Mother Mary first. So, Mother Mary, obviously, Jesus' mom. She has been said to have a virgin birth or an immaculate conception. That's like a huge story about the Virgin Mary, right? I mean, it's right there in her name, the Virgin Mary. An interesting thing about that, though, so much of the Bible has been massaged by, we'll just call it the patriarchy for simplicity's sake. It's thousands of years of people taking this sacred text, which, by the way, was written by a human and thus processed through everything that a human filtration system does, which, as we all know, can be a little dicey at best at times. And it was then filtered and filtered and filtered again. People have taken stuff out of it. People have changed things around, taken things out of context, even shifted the very basic translations of specific words. And the word virgin is just one of those words. So in Hebrew, the original word that has now been translated as virgin actually meant young. And she was scared. She was a human in everything that means, including the way that her son was birthed into the world. See, I don't want to go into it too much here because we're going to talk about Jesus in the next set of these videos. But Jesus, too, was a man. That's like at the fundamental base of all of his work, and the actual inspirational aspect of his story is that he was a man. He was a human, just like all of us. So, like I said, I'll get into that in the following videos. But using the word virgin to describe Mary. Okay, so here's what happened. The Hebrews wrote it. They wrote young Mary. The Greeks came in and they translated things. And they took young and replaced it with virgin. And you know what that did, effectively, is it took Mary out of humanness, and it took Jesus out of humanness, and it thereby cut the rest of us off from really identifying with them as other human beings. And that's where the true power of these stories come in, is when we can identify with them as we are and as they were. In creating this kind of mythical virgin figure, it robbed Mary of her true power, and that was of a strong and capable young woman who carried the weight of this blessing, of these visions that she'd had on her shoulders. And that, I think, is where the really interesting story is. Not in her having this immaculate conception, but in her being real and true and gritty and flawed. It's just one of many, many instances of the church using their power to fuck over women. And in fucking over women, fuck over everyone. Because when they put the Virgin Mary into this pure, hallowed place, what they did was essentially, and very specifically and explicitly along the years, said that the rest of women, that the creative power, that sex and blood and dirt and everything that is femininity and creation was wrong and dirty and should be avoided at all costs, except of course when it's subjugated to the point of being palatable to the people in power. And that is exactly what happened with the Virgin Mary, and the effects of that, the way that this powerful woman has been used to suppress the power of other women through this mythos and through the rhetoric and through the dogma that sprang up around her. It's just, it makes me sick. It absolutely makes me sick. And this is why we're reclaiming it, right? This is why we're reclaiming this shit. Because we're powerful. I don't care what's between your legs or what your chromosomes say. We are powerful. We're way more powerful than this institution has been telling us that we are. This institution that says, no, there has to be space between you and God because you're not worthy. You're worthy. You're 100% worthy. And I know that in my heart. Okay, off that soapbox. On to Mary Magdalene. Mary Magdalene. So she's been, Magdalene. Let's start there. This is not a name, but a place. So like a lot of times you'll see people are named after places that they lived. So she lived in Magdalene, which has also been translated to tower or fortress. So she is Mary of the Fortress. Isn't that beautiful? Can't we all see those beautiful boundaries around her? Yes, Mary of the Fortress. She was a woman who would not get married, and she lived by herself, a single woman, pushing away all suitors, and not just suitors, but like the intense pressure of that time to get hitched. Like, oh my God, she's fantastic. So she gets wind of Jesus. Gets wind of Jesus, isn't that a sentence to say? And she meets up with him. I'm not sure exactly how. I didn't dive too deep into that. But she becomes essentially his financial backing. And she follows him from place to place and pays for him to do his teachings and to be fed and clothed and housed. And she's been called by the Catholics the Apostle of the Apostles, or the Apostle to the Apostles rather, for various reasons, because Jesus loved her so much. So much. She sat at his right hand, which, if you know anything about the context of that time or many hundreds of years after, even presently, like that's a big fucking deal. She sat at his right hand, a woman at the right hand of Jesus, where the church would tell you, especially the Catholic Church would tell you, no. Women don't sit there. Women can't be priests. It was written that Jesus freed her from 7 demons, and the Catholic Church has equated that to her being a sinful woman, which is code word for sex worker. She's also been conflated with the woman in the story where Jesus gets his feet washed and then anointed by oil with her hair. That woman was a sex worker. May or may not have been Mary Magdalene. The debate's out, but it's kind of leaning towards not Mary Magdalene. But the idea that she is a sex worker has definitely clung on to her. And the way that I see it is that whether or not the historical figure of Mary Magdalene was a sex worker, her mythos and her archetype now has had this attached to it for so long that there's a reason for that. And it's not just the patriarchy, because we get to reclaim things. And having this attached to her name, attached to her energy, they start to interweave. And we can then tap into that energy through her. Like, she's present in the sex worker archetype now, and the sex worker archetype is present in her archetype. So she's someone that we can tap into when we want to do sex magic of a particular kind, which I'll get into more in the next video. The Catholics called her, like I mentioned, apostle to the apostles. And the reason that they called her this, first and foremost, was because she was the first person to see Jesus after the resurrection. He got out of his tomb, she was in the garden, and she was weeping, 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 and crying so hard that she didn't recognize Jesus until he said her name. And then she looked up and she clung to him, and he said, "No, you cannot cling to me, for I have not risen to the Father yet. No, you have to let me go, because I have the next step on my journey to take, and so do you." Those are my words, by the way, my interpretation of good old JC. And he told her to go and tell the apostles that he had risen. She was the apostle to the apostles through this moment, and through her devotion to Jesus and to his cause and to teaching his work after he died. She's said to have been the head of the church after, but there was conflict between her and Peter, because Peter wanted to be the head of the church and wanted to be the one that Jesus loved the most. And yeah, just a whole bunch of fragile male egos getting in the way. But her presence has sparked like different cults and sects that are devoted to her and her particular kind of worship, which is very much colored by the worship of Isis. It was said that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were devotees of Isis in some places. That's, of course, kind of maybe a reach for some people to get to. I could see it. Sure, why not? As we'll talk about in the Jesus video, I've got some interesting thoughts on Jesus, just in general. But she embodies this creative power. She's in the Bible a lot, I think more than any other woman that's in the Bible, and she's been cut out of the Bible a lot too. She shows up in a ton of apocryphal texts. She even has her own gospel. You can find it on Amazon or other places that aren't complete evil corporations. But she shows up so frequently. There's like so much written about her and from her mouth, like things that she said. So you can really dive in deep into exploring all of those texts. Even in these gospels, there's stupid man versus woman shit. There's Peter coming up to do his thing. There's other people saying, like, no, not this woman, not here, not with us, you. In particular, after Jesus dies, and I believe this is in the Gospel of Mary, she gets a vision from him, a visitation from him. And she comes forward and she brings it to the rest of the apostles and she tells them. And Peter is like, no, why should we believe you? You're a woman. Peter, you're such a dick. So there's stuff written in both the Bible and in these apocryphal texts about how women are a distraction from the faith and how they can't be attached to spiritual pursuits. There's even a passage about how women have to become men in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, which, like, if that's not shit written by a man, I don't know what is. Seriously. Another soapbox. Oh, this video is full of little soapboxes, isn't it? Sacred texts are written by humans. Why do we keep forgetting this? Sacred texts are written by humans. They're translated by humans. We don't know the historical context. We have to take all of this stuff with a grain of salt and find the truth in it for us. We are the sieves, and the truth will rise to the surface if we fucking let it. But when we take the whole bag and hold it like it's, I don't know, like it's this full on, all of it is sacred, everything is perfect exactly the way that it is, and right and true exactly the way that it is, we lose all of it. We lose all of it. Okay, back to Mary and Mary. So Mary Magdalene is said, I saw this written somewhere, that Mary Magdalene is like working on the horizontal, whereas working with Mother Mary is working on the vertical. So what that means is the horizontal is like everything that we encounter in this incarnation. It is the manifest. It is this way, from me to you, from you to the next person. Whereas the vertical is the connection of the earth and the sky, of Mother Earth and Father Sky. And it's this, like, how we connect with divinity here. And then the horizontal is how we move that out into the world. It's the difference between faith and works. And as the Bible says, faith without works is dead. We need to get our hands in the soil. And Mary Magdalene is great for supporting that. Harking back to the connection with Isis, Mary Magdalene reminds me so much of the High Priestess card. Now, I'm going to show this in the video. We've got a woman seated on her throne with the Torah in one hand and the moon at her feet, and this veil between her and the water behind her, and the pillars of black and white, I don't remember their names exactly, on either side of her. She's the keeper of secrets. She holds this esoteric knowledge in her hands and asks if you are willing to explore it with her. Are you willing to go into the depths? Are you willing to take the risk of engaging with this particular energy, with the divine feminine, with the energy of action and receptivity? Because one without the other is not balanced, but she does take action. Mary Magdalene, she puts her feet on the ground. She gets dirty with the rest of the apostles and with Jesus. And she asks us to do the same thing. And I'll get into that more in the next video. But now you know some of the basics of the difference between Mary Magdalene and Mother Mary. And I hope that helps. I hope that has opened up something inside of you, some spaciousness. Please like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. Share it with friends. Share it with people that you don't like. I don't care. Just share it. That'd be fun. And remember, I do have 3 slots for coaching open for $100. 3 45-minute calls helps get you unstuck and onto your next big thing. If you are interested, go to www.squeakiescauldron.com/coaching to sign up. In our next video, we'll be talking about how to call upon Mary Magdalene, what areas in your life she can help with, how to give offerings to her and what offerings to give, and much more. So be sure to check that out, and check out the Mary Magdalene meditation. That should be out today. If it's not out today, it will be out shortly, I promise. And until next time, my loves, as always, use your voice.